Já estamos live. Olá a todos, estão a ver isto como um vídeo, estamos a mais ou menos 20 minutos, 18 minutos do começo da revelação, do livestream de revelação da nova Playstation. Fica comigo, se estás a ver isto como um vídeo, avança agora aos 20 minutinhos e podes começar já a ver a conferência comigo. Eu estou live, por isso vou estar aqui a falar com o pessoal, a fazer tempo para começarmos a ver todos em conjunto esta revelação desta nova consola. Olá Francisco, como é que estás? E vou partilhar agora nas redes sociais, já sabes, se estás a ver isto como um vídeo, avança até às revelações aí nas setinhas do fucking YouTube. Eu vejo já. Quem está comigo aqui em live, Zés? Bem-vindos. Espero aqui a musiquinha de fundo. Zés, Ruben, como é que estás? Zés, partilhem aí a live, por favor, no vosso Instagram e deem aquele like. Não se esqueçam do like, Zés. Quem está aí dê o like. Não se esqueça que isso ajuda a live a ser partilhada para outras pessoas. E, partilhem nas redes sociais, subscrevam o canal, ativem o sininho. Só das 2800, só 300 pessoas é que têm o sininho ativo. Acho que eu consigo ver isso. Ativem o sininho que é muito importante. Como é que é, Rodrigo? Parece que sim, Ruben. Temos uma ligação espetacular à Sony aqui no céu. Olá, Francisco. Só partilhar nas redes sociais, sim, Zés. Ainda falta, começa às 4, por isso. Tem que ir aqui ao site Thumbnail Grabber para buscar a thumbnail. Está tudo bem contigo, bro? Saúde. Saúde. É assim, podemos fazer, sabes o quê? Sabem o quê? Procurar a live oficial. Vamos ao Eurogamer que lá deve dizer qual é a página para ver. Aqui. Vamos dar o likezinho. Escrever aqui let's go guys. E estamos na página oficial Playstation, Zé, já. Como é que é? Sacan e Rica Atomics, como é que vocês estão, Zé? Vamos estar aqui já à espera. Faltam mais ou menos 14 minutos para a gente começar a ver a nova Playstation. E pode ser que eles falem de jogos também, maybe. Mas em princípio deve ser só os specs. Já sabemos como é que vai ser a Xbox. A Xbox vai ser capaz de correr jogos até 4K a 60 frames. Sabemos que vai ter 16 GB de RAM, um processador de 8 cores. Não sei se é 4 em hyperthreading ou se é 8 cores. Não sei se tem hyperthreading, deve ter. Hoje em dia os PCs têm. Mas é uma consola fixe. Assumimos que a Playstation vai fazer o mesmo. Já sabia que a Playstation estava só à espera que a Xbox revelasse a sua mão para revelar a sua. A Sony estava só à espera. A Xbox revelou, 1 ou 2 dias depois a Playstation já tem a conferência prestes a ser feita, né? Provavelmente é um vídeo que eles gravaram, se calhar nem é uma conferência. Se calhar é uma live stream daquelas tipo da Nintendo, quando eles fazem aquelas Nintendo Directs, tipo Playstation Direct, vá. Como é que estás, Martim? Eu quero ver se faço uma live hoje, às 9. Outra live. Olha, estou aqui a dançar em vez de estar a publicar as cenas. What the fuck? Não sei se faço live de Call of Duty Warzone solos ou então squads com vocês a aparecerem na live. Ou se faço um bocadinho do modo de carreira do Aurélio Libelinha no FIFA. Ainda estou para decidir. Podemos escolher aqui as músicas. Isto é tudo músicas que vocês estão a ouvir do Driver 1 da Playstation 1, um jogo que eu adoro. Isto é a banda sonora do jogo. Como é que estás, Francisco? Bem-vindo! Zé, 12 minutinhos para começar a conferência, o vídeo, para conhecermos a nova Playstation, que, se Deus quiser, não vai ser adiada para o ano que vem, mas já ouvi dizer que é muito, muito, muito provável ser adiado o lançamento das consolas também, como está tudo a ser adiado. Ainda ontem se soube que foi adiado o Euro para 2021. Agora o interessante que eu quero ver é se para sempre vai ficar no número ímpar, o europeu. Porque era sempre 2 em 2 anos. Tínhamos em 2010, depois 2012 o europeu, 2014 o mundial, 2016 o europeu, 2018 o mundial, 2020 o europeu. Agora o europeu vai ficar para 2021. Isso quer dizer que o próximo mundial vai ser em 23 e depois o europeu em 25. Será que vai mudar para sempre ou vão fazer 2 seguidos? Não me parece que vão fazer 2 seguidos, mas... Aqui é Henrique Firmino, está tudo, Zé. Deixem-me publicar aqui, já estou aqui a falar convosco e estar a publicar a cena. Aqui a livezinha. Em live. Nova PlayStation 5. Para nova PlayStation 5. Para o pessoal prestar attention. youtube.com/chama-me Vitor. Pessoal, estamos todos aqui. Não se esqueçam, eu sei que muitos de vocês não dão like porque ou não querem estar a tirar o full screen ou okay, mas deem, que ajuda muito o canal, e liguem os sininhos para terem uma notificação quando eu faço live. Eu vi que tenho 300 e tal pessoas das 2800 que têm o sininho. Vamos dar sininhos. Algum de vocês jogou o Driver 1? Provavelmente muitos de vocês são novos para ter jogado o Driver 1. Foi de 2000 e pouco ou 90 e muitos. 2000 e pouco. É muito fixe, um bocadinho arcaico hoje em dia, né? Tendo em conta os nossos standards, mas muito porreirinho. Agora vai ser um... Yeah. Onde é que está agora? Aqui, partilhar aqui. O vosso apoio tem sido muito bom nestes últimos tempos, pessoal. Muito, muito bom mesmo. Vocês aparecem sempre aí, dizem um olá. Quem pode ficar, fica. Quem não pode, sai, obviamente. Mas vocês têm estado sempre aí alguns e têm feito companhia. E tem mesmo valido a pena estar aqui no canal. Mas conseguimos que chamais. Estas músicas aceleradas davam no driver quando vocês estavam a ser perseguidos pela polícia. É as músicas de alerta. Chama-me Vitor. Olá, Rafael, como é que estás? Só aqui a publicar nas redes sociais, malucos, a livezinha, assim? PlayStation 5, yeah. Bora. Pôr no Twitter. Quando vês a Coimbra? Sei lá, bro. Por acaso não conheço ninguém daí. Acho que nunca fui a Coimbra. Muito bom. Vocês acham que vai ser revelado alguns jogos hoje aqui na conferência? Ou vai ser mesmo só tipo um vídeo de 5 minutos ou 10 da consola? É que eu não sei, Zés. Esta live vai ser só mesmo a duração, vai ficar no canal gravado, vai ser a duração da revelação, Zés. Por acaso nunca fui, meu. Não te queria. Deixa-me publicar aqui no Twitter agora. Nova PlayStation revelada aqui. Enganei-me a escrever PlayStation, escrevi Plaustarion. Parece o nome de um planeta, tipo de uma estação espacial da Plaustarion. É isso, eu não sabia escrever. PlayStation, nice. Tweetar. Bora. Ué, groovy a música. Faltam 7 minutinhos. Não evitei a jogar um joguinho de mobile, mas por 7 minutos. e pá, daqui a 5 minutos deve começar, ou se calhar daqui a 7 minutos começa aquela cena com a música e tudo ainda, não sei, vamos ver. Se começar já, pode ser que comece mesmo daqui a 7 minutos, não pode começar daqui a 7 minutos a introdução. Quanto é que acha que vai ser o preço? Eles vão revelar o preço? Será que vão revelar o preço? Olha que não sei, porque a Xbox não revelou deles, por isso a Sony não vai revelar também o preço. Há quem diga 600, mas acho que 600 é muito. Boas, Nelson, como é que é? Provavelmente vão revelar várias versões e uma delas pode bater nos 600 euros. Especialmente se eles... Isso eu acho que é o preço base, Nelson. O base vai ser 500. Mas depois devem lançar uma versão mais potente, se calhar a 600. E não sei se depois querem meter o VR junto ou o quê, nessa versão. 499 a mais cara? 500 a mais cara? E a mais barata é o quê? 400? É muito pouco, 400 é hoje em dia. E vai ser adiada, se calhar. Mas eles não vão falar em data de lançamento ou show nem nada. Digo eu, não sei. Podem dizer Holiday, não faço a mínima ideia. Isso é muito barato, Nelson. Mas olha, era bom. Quem me dera a mim, Nelson. Quem me dera a mim. Eu acho que vai ser para aí 600 a mais cara, 499 a base. É, Lourenço, às vezes um gajo faz uma ceninha sobre filmes, ou hoje neste caso é uma cena da PlayStation. Sempre que há conferências assim, seja a E3 que este ano foi cancelada, seja estas revelações, seja os Game of the Year Awards, eu tento sempre fazer lives. Vocês podem ver no canal, com anos para trás, que eu tenho os eventos, praticamente todos, ou muitos eventos, vamos dizer muitos eventos, vamos dizer praticamente todos, vamos dizer muitos eventos no canal em que eu estou a ver e a reagir, a falar convosco no chat. Exatamente, e o Nelson lá nas conferências, é sempre ali a ver comigo e a comentar. E é verdade, é bem verdade. A Pro aconteceu foi 400 pau, mas esta está tipo, muito mais poderosa que a Pro, estás a ver? Não sei, também não sei até que mercado o bolso das pessoas vai aguentar, ainda mais com a economia a cair como está a cair agora. Porque o que está a cair na economia para já são as grandes companhias e não as pessoas individuais. Esta emissão é de comissão. Esta música é de comissão. Soundtrack 2 é New York de dia. Eram estes gráficos dos jogos, és? Por isso é que tem que ser mais barata, né, Nelson? Era giro, mas depois a Microsoft pode apresentar um preço mais barato. Isto é, se não for os 499 pela mais cara. Porque eu duvido, a PlayStation só apresentou o preço porque a PlayStation gosta sempre de ficar atrás da Microsoft. Que é para ter tempo de reagir. A PlayStation só apresentou um preço se souber que a Xbox não consegue fazer um preço mais barato. Agora vai ser a música de perseguição da polícia? E nos comentários aqui, Zés, vou escrever também alguma coisa. Zés, foi. E tudo o vento levou. É verdade, Nelson, mas depende. Um PC em condições, 1000 euros já não chega. Para ser mesmo top. Não esqueci que o PS3 foi 600 euros. Depende. Se calhar vão dizer, temos a versão de 499 que é normal. 4K, 60 FPS. Zés, não quer dizer que se for anunciado que dá 4K para 60 FPS, não quer dizer que os jogos não saiam a 30 FPS. A consola aguenta 60 FPS a 4K. Como a Xbox. Anda a falar do exemplo da Xbox ou se for anunciado na PlayStation. Não quer dizer que os jogos vão ser assim. As companhias que os fazem, que os têm que desenvolver para correr assim. Podem desenvolver jogos a 30. Percebem? Eu acredito que muitos caras dos top da Sony, como têm muitos bons gráficos, se calhar vão ser a 30 para pontar a puxar a consola até ao limite. Claro que foi, a PlayStation fica logo atrás por causa desse preço, Nelson, é bem verdade. Era basicamente a perder dinheiro em cada consola. Se bem que muitas companhias estão dispostas a perder assim dinheiro nas consolas ou a ganhar uma margem tipo só de 10 euros que seja, para depois meter lá os players e ganhar dinheiro com os exclusivos e nas compras feitas na sua store. Provavelmente a margem de lucro das consolas é bastante pequena. Agora vejam assim, se eles conseguem fazer uma consola ou um PC tão poderoso e lançá-lo a este preço com margem de lucro, imaginem o exagero que a gente como consumer, como uma pessoa que vai comprar as peças, gasta. Fica-lhes mesmo baratos, fazer as peças e nós pagamos milhares, velho. Isto é o quê? É New York at Night. Depois é New York at Night. Com perseguição. E adoro isto, meus és. Ah, que nostalgia. Vê lá, Nelson. É mesmo, os jogos são mesmo caros. Pouco mais caros, mas um bocadinho mais caros. E cá em Portugal é sempre mais caro que lá fora. Se fores comprar tipo para a Inglaterra, acho que é tipo 40 e tal libras. 40, nem sei. Sei que ficava tipo 50 e tal euros, não chegava aos 60. E nós temos alguns a 70 já. Porque é nos jogos que eles vão buscar dinheiro. E é normal, man. Se há 7 jogos que demoram 5 anos a ser feitos por uma equipa gigante que recebe salários enormes, eles têm que fazer dinheiro de alguma maneira. Zés, começa dentro de 60 segundos, mal isto começar, mal isto abrir, logo desligar a música e prex, full screen, eu e tu, a vermos a revelação da consola. Queres ver vocês a comentar, a dizer a vossa opinião aí também, Zés, nos comentários. E tu que estás a ver isto como vídeo, está mesmo prestes a começar. Isto vai ficar aqui gravado para ti. Vê lá, 24 contos. 24? Foda-se! 120 euros! O que era uma edição especial, Zé? Isso na altura com a inflação é caríssimo, Zé. Mesmo caríssimo. Só, meu Deus. Vamos lá, dar um refreshzinho a ver se isto começa. Ainda não? Vai começar em breve, eles já vão ligar, Zé. Jesus, meu. Olha, abrandou o chat. O pessoal começa logo a dizer aqui refresh, acho eu. Yeah. Pararam. Oh shit, Zés. Achas que vai ser um vídeo tipo os vídeos da Nintendo Direct, bro? Nelson. Pam. Doom Eternal, tá? Parece que está muito fixe. Deixa eu ver aqui a thumbnail em baixo. Dá refreshzinho. PS Home 2, está aqui um gajo a dizer, e ainda ontem falei sobre isso numa live, na live do Saki. Quem me dera que eu houvesse PlayStation Home 2, tipo assim um hubzinho, estão a ver? Podiam pôr publicidades e caralho lá se quisessem, mas para o pessoal ter uma sua personagem, a sua casa, é giro, meu. Zé, estamos cá. 2 minutos. Já pus aqui F5 para o pessoal. VR2 também. Se calhar o VR2 é só daqui a um ano, só não vai ser um preço muito alto para a consola. Se vier com o VR, estás a ver? Vais comprar a consola, mais um VR de 300 ou 400 euros. Por isso, se calhar para o próximo Natal, tipo no Natal a seguir a sair a consola, maybe. O som, como é que estás, és? Assim, né? Se eu falar, vocês ouvem, mas se eu me calar. Não. Vai estar só para mim um bocadinho. Mas tem que estar alto para vocês que durante as reveals eu vou calar. Zés, full screen. Amigos. É agora. A nova geração está prestes a começar, meus amigos. Não sei se vão fazer isso. Era giro mostrarem tipo uns snippets, um bocadinho de jogos. Era giro se eles mostravam mesmo uma cena que ninguém está à espera. Consola, preço, lançamento e um rolo de jogos. Tipo i3. Faziam um i3 assim de repente. Mas isso parece ser mais para o verão. Se ela sair no final do ano, mais para o verão. E se ela sair para o ano que vem, por causa do vírus, se calhar mais para o Natal. Boa tarde, Rui. Bem-vindo. Mas a Sony também é menina para lançar as bombas assim. Talvez não todas, para guardar sempre a surpresazinha, senão depois não havia hype, porque ainda falta para a consola ser lançada, mas a Sony fazer assim uma cena surpreendente. Eu acho que a Sony das duas uma, faz uma cena surpreendente, ficamos todos oh my god, ou faz uma cena super safe, que ficamos todos I guess. Nelson. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, Here we go, boys. Os próximos 8 anos do gaming.
Hi. Unfortunately, we had to cancel the talk that we had planned for GDC. But we do have some super exciting news about PS5. And who better to bring that to you than the one and only Mark Cerny. Without further ado, over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Jim.
Isto é vídeo gravado.
There will be lots of chances later on this year to look at the PlayStation 5 games. Today, I want to talk a bit about our goals for the PlayStation 5 hardware and how they influenced the development of the console. I think you all know I'm a big believer in console generations. Once every 5 or 6 or 7 years, a console arrives with substantially new capabilities. There's a lot of learning by the game developers, hopefully not too overwhelming, and soon there's games that could never have been created before. Now, it used to be that as a console designer, you'd somehow intuit what would be the best set of capabilities for the new console, and then build it in complete secrecy. For the PlayStation consoles, that period lasted through PlayStation 3, a powerful and groundbreaking console, but also one that caused
É mesmo de lá, Zé.
as it was
Está no máximo.
difficult to develop games for. So, starting with PlayStation 4, we've taken a different approach, roughly centered around 3 principles. The first of these is listening to the developers, which is to say
Dá mais alto
a
bocadinho.
lot of what we put into a console derives directly from the needs and aspirations of the game creators. We definitely do have some ideas of our own, but at the core of our philosophy for designing consoles is that game players are here for the fantastic games, which is to say that game creators matter. Anything we can do to make life easier for the game creators or help them realize their dreams, we will do. So, about once every 2 years, I take a tour of the industry. I go to the various developers and publishers, sit down, and discuss how they're doing with the current consoles and what they'd like to see
Yeah,
in
Nelson.
future consoles. This requires weeks on the road, as reaching the bulk of the game creators involves talking to well over 100 people at something like 24 publishers and developers. And it is incredibly valuable. By the way, the feature most requested by the developers, that was an SSD, which we were very happy to put in the hardware, but a lot of problem solving was required. I'll be doing a deep dive on the SSD and surrounding systems later on in this talk.
É o designer da PlayStation, é, Zé?
It's also key to make a generational
Isso é pelo que aparece a falar das
keeping the
consolas.
console sufficiently familiar
dos.
to game developers. I think about this in terms of balancing evolution and revolution. Now, with PlayStation 1, 2, and 3, the target was a revolution each time with a brand new feature set. That was great in many ways, but time for the developers to get up and running got longer with each console. In the past, I've called this time to triangle. Here's what I had for those 3 consoles. To be clear, I'm not talking about time to make a game. Developers will be ambitious, and it may take them 6 years or so to realize their vision. What I'm talking about is that dead time before graphics and other aspects of game development are up and running, and trying to minimize that. On the other hand, if we're trying to reduce that dead time to 0, that means the hardware architecture can't change at all. We're handcuffed. We need to judge for each feature what value it adds and whether it's worth the increase in developer time needed to support it. So with PlayStation 4, we were able to strike a pretty good balance between performance and familiarity. We got required learning back to PlayStation 1 levels. With PS5, the GPU was definitely the area we felt the most tension between adding new features and keeping a familiar programming model. Ultimately, I think we've ended up with something under a month of getting up to speed. That feels like we're striking about the right balance. I'll go into a bit more detail later today about our philosophy with the GPU and the specific feature set that resulted from it. It's also very important for us, as the hardware team, to find new dreams, by which I mean something other than CPU performance, GPU performance,
Finding new dreams,
and the amount of RAM. The increase in graphics performance over the past 2 decades has been astonishing, but there are other areas in which we can innovate and provide significant value to the game creators, and through them, the players. That's why the SSD was very much on our list of directions to explore, regardless of what came out of the conversations with game developers and publishers. The biggest feature in this category is the custom engine for audio. That's today's final topic. The push for vastly improved audio, and in particular 3D audio, isn't something that came out of the developer meetings. It's much more the case that we had a dream of what might be possible 5 years from now. and then worked out a number of steps we could take to set us on that path. So here again are the three principles, the first being enabling the desires of developers to drive the hardware design. To me, the SSD really is the key to the next generation. It's a game changer. And it was the #1 ask from developers for PlayStation 5. As in, we know it's probably impossible, but can you put an SSD in it? That was a discussion we were also having internally. It was clear that the presence of a hard drive in every PlayStation 4 was having a positive impact. A lot of things that would simply have been impossible at Blu-ray disc speeds were now possible. At the same time, though, in 2015 and 2016, when we were having these conversations, developers were already banging up against the limits of the hard drive, and a lot of developer time was being spent designing around slow load speeds. I want to focus in on just one number here, which is how long it takes to load a gigabyte of data from a hard drive. The difficulty being that hard drives are neither particularly fast nor flexible. If all your data is in one block, which is frankly not very likely, you can load 50 to 100 megabytes a second, depending on where the data is located on the hard drive. Let's assume it's on the outer edge, which means loading a gigabyte takes 10 seconds. If you compress your game packages, you can fit more data on the Blu-ray disc and also effectively boost your hard drive read speed by the compression ratio. We support zlib decompression on PlayStation 4 that gets you something like 50% more data on the disk and 50% higher effective read speed. Unfortunately, though, it's highly likely that your data is scattered around in various files on the hard drive, as well as sourced from multiple locations within those files. So lots of seeks are needed at 2 to 50-ish milliseconds each. My rule of thumb is that the hard drive is spending 2/3 of its time seeking, and only 1/3 of its time actually
Por
loading.
acaso não é assim tão grande, mas
Putting
é.
all of that together, a gigabyte is very roughly 20 seconds to load from a hard drive. Now, a gigabyte is not much data. Games are using 5 or 6 gigabytes of RAM on PlayStation 4, so boot times and load times can get pretty grim. Or to put that differently, as a player, you wait for the game to boot, wait for the game to load, wait for the level to reload every time you die, and you wait for what is euphemistically called fast travel. And all of that leads to the dream. What if we could have not just an SSD, but a blindingly fast SSD? If we could load 5 gigabytes a second from it, what would change? Now, SSDs are completely different from hard drives. They don't have seeks as such. If you have a 5 gigabyte a second SSD, you can read data from 1,000 different locations in that second, pretty much at speed. As for time to load a gigabyte, this is next gen we're talking about, so memory is bigger. Instead, we should be asking how long to load 2 gigabytes. And the answer is about 1/4 of a second. I mean, that's amazing. We're talking 2 orders of magnitude, meaning very roughly 100 times faster. Which means at 5 gigabytes a second for the SSD, the potential is that the game boots in a second. There are no load screens. The game just fades down while loading a half dozen gigabytes and fades back up again. Same for a reload. You're immediately back in the action after you die. And fast travel becomes so fast it's blink and you miss it.
Portanto, vamos ter texturas maiores e mais coisas para puxar o jogo. Logo, não sei se vai balancear bocadinho.
Taking, like those Spider-Man subway rides, to being so blindingly fast that we might even have to slow that transition down. Pretty cool, right? But for me, this is not the primary reason to change from a hard drive to an SSD. The primary reason for an ultra-fast SSD is that it gives the game designer freedom. Or to put that differently, with a hard drive, the 20 seconds that it takes to load a gigabyte can sabotage the game that the developer is trying to create. I think almost all of us in the room have experienced this, maybe in different ways. Say we're making an adventure game and we have 2 rich environments where we each want enough textures and models to fill memory, which you can do as long as you have a long staircase or elevator ride or a windy corridor where you can ditch the old assets and then take 30 seconds or so to load the new assets. Having a 30-second elevator ride is a little extreme. More realistically, we'd probably chop the world into a number of smaller pieces and then do some calculations with sight lines and run speeds like we
É
did
que não estejam
for
tanto a focar no SSD porque o resto não vai ser muito interessante.
The game is 20 years old, but not much has changed since then. All those twisty passages are there for a reason. There's a whole subset of level design dedicated to this sort of work, but still, it's a giant distraction for a team that just wants to make their game. So when I talked about the dream of an SSD, part of the reason for that 5 gigabyte a second target was to eliminate loads, but also part of the reason for that target was streaming. As in, what if the SSD is so fast that as the player is turning around, it's possible to load textures for everything behind the player in that split second?
Diz que não dê stutter.
Figure that it takes half a second to turn. That's 4 gigabytes of compressed data you can load. That sounds about right for next gen. Anyway, back to the hard drive. Another strategy for increasing effective read speed is to make big sequential chunks of data. For example, we might group all the data together for each city block. That removes most of the seeks, and the streaming gets faster. But there's a downside too, which is that frequently used data is included in many chunks and therefore is on the hard drive many, many times. Marvel's Spider-Man uses this strategy, and though it works very well for increasing the streaming speed, there's a massive duplication as a result. Some of the objects like mailboxes or news racks are on the hard drive 400 times. What I'm describing here are things that cramp a creative director's style. Either level design gets a little bit boring in places, or the data is duplicated so many times that it no longer fits on the Blu-ray disc. And you end up with hard limits on the player's run speed or driving speed. The player can't go faster than the load speed from the hard drive.
Adoro como ele olha para um lado e para o outro como se estivesse numa conferência mesmo.
Notice that after a patch download, the PlayStation 4 will sometimes take a long time to install the patch. That's because when just part of a file has been changed, the new data can be downloaded pretty quickly. But before the game boots up, a brand new file has to be constructed that includes the changed portion. Otherwise, every change would add a seek or two. Even so, you can occasionally see this happening on game titles. They start to hitch once they get patched enough. With an SSD, though, no seeks, so no need to make brand new files with the changes incorporated into them, which means no installs as you know them today.
É um vídeo só.
There's
Fazer de conta que é uma
one
conferência.
benefit, which is that system memory can be used much more efficiently. On PlayStation 4, game data on the hard drive feels very distant and difficult to use. By the time you realize you need a piece of data, it's much too late to go out and load it. So system memory has to contain all of the data that could be used in the next 30 seconds or so of gameplay. That means a lot of the 8 gigabytes of system memory is idle. It's just waiting there to be potentially used. On PlayStation 5, though, the SSD is very close to being like more RAM. Typically, it's fast enough that when you realize you need a piece of data, you can just load it from the SSD and use it. There's no need to have lots of data parked in system memory waiting to potentially be used. A different way of saying that is that most of RAM is working on the game's behalf. This is one of the reasons that 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 feels right for PlayStation 5. The presence of the SSD reduces the need for a massive intergenerational increase in size. So,
16 GB como a Xbox.
here's
RAM.
the set of targets. Boot the game in a second. No load screens. Design freedom, meaning no twisty passages or long corridors. More game on the disk and more game on the SSD. And finally, those patch installs go away. The reality, though, is that the SSD is just one piece of the puzzle. There's a lot of places where bottlenecks can occur in between the SSD and the game code that uses the data. You can see this on PlayStation 4. If I use an SSD with 10 times the speed of a standard hard drive, I probably see only double the loading speed, if that. For PlayStation 5, our goal was not just that the SSD itself be 100 times faster. It was that game loads and streaming would be 100 times faster. So every single potential bottleneck needed to be addressed. And there are a lot of them. Let's look at check-in and what happens when its overhead gets 100 times larger. Conceptually, check-in is a pretty simple process. Data is loaded into system memory from the hard drive or SSD. It's examined. A few values are tweaked to check it in, and then it's moved to its final location. At the SSD speeds we're talking about, that last part, moving the data, meaning copying it from one location to another, takes roughly an entire next-gen CPU core. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. If all the overheads get 100 times larger, that will cripple the frame rate as soon as the player moves and that massive stream of data starts coming off the SSD. So to solve all of that, we built a lot of custom hardware, namely a custom flash controller and a number of custom units in our main chip. The flash controller in the SSD was designed for smooth and bottleneck-free operation, but also with games in mind. For example, there are 6 levels of priority when reading from the SSD. Priority is very important. You can imagine the player heading into some new location in the world and the game requesting a few gigabytes of textures. And while those textures are being loaded, an enemy is shot and has to speak a few dying words. Having multiple priority levels lets the audio for those dying words get loaded immediately.
Pois, porque só um SSD não resolvia, porque as estruturas
On one
vai ser
side,
tudo
the
maior.
flash controller connects to the actual flash dies that supply the storage. To reach our bandwidth target of 5 gigabytes a second, we ended up with a 12-channel interface. 8 channels wouldn't be enough. The resulting bandwidth we've achieved is actually 5.5 gigabytes a second. With a 12-channel interface, the most natural size that emerges for an SSD is 825 gigabytes. The key question for us was, is that enough? I mean, it's tempting to add more, but flash certainly doesn't come cheap, and we have a responsibility to our gaming audience to be cost-effective with regards to what we put in the console. Ultimately, we resolved this question by looking at the play patterns of a broad range of gamers. We examined the specific games that they were playing over the course of a weekend or a week or a month, and whether that set of games would fit properly on the SSD. We were able to establish that the friction caused by reinstalls or redownloads would be quite low, and so we locked in on that 825 gigabyte size, while also preparing multiple strategies so that those who want more storage can add it. I'll go through the details.
825 gigas.
Back to the flash controller.
Não
On the other
tera,
side, it connects
como a
to our main
Xbox,
custom chip
perto.
via 4 lanes of Gen 4.
Mas podem pôr mais. Podem adicionar mais.
Inside the main custom chip is a pretty hefty unit dedicated to I/O. Before we talk about what that does, let's talk compression for a moment. PlayStation 4 used...
Credo, Leonor.
We decided to use it
Bem-vinda.
again on PlayStation 5, but on my 2017 tour of developers, I learned about a new format called Kraken from Rad Game Tools. It's like zlib's smarter cousin. Simple, similar types of algorithms, but about 10% better compression, which is pretty big. That means 10% more game on the UHD Blu-ray disc or on the SSD. Kraken had only been out for a year, but it was already becoming a de facto industry standard. Half of the teams I talked to were either using it or getting ready to evaluate it. So we hustled and built a custom decompressor into the I/O unit, one capable of handling over 5 gigabytes of Kraken format input data a second. After decompression, that typically becomes 8 or 9 gigabytes, but the unit itself is capable of outputting as much as 22 gigabytes a second if the data happen to compress particularly well. By the way, in terms of performance, that custom decompressor equates to 9 of our Zen 2 cores. That's what it would take to decompress the Kraken stream with a conventional CPU. There's a lot more in the custom I/O unit, including a dedicated DMA controller. The game can direct exactly where it wants to send the data coming off of the SSD. This equates to another Zen 2 core or 2 in terms of its copy performance. Its primary purpose is to remove check-in as a bottleneck. There's 2 dedicated I/O coprocessors and a large RAM pool. These aren't Zen 2 cores. They're there principally to direct the variety of custom hardware.
Para nós, para a maior parte de nós, é tudo chinês, é verdade. Parece mais para developers que outra coisa. Vamos ver se eles mostram alguma coisa mais user-friendly para a frente, né?
File I/O and its bottlenecks when reading from the SSD. The other is responsible for memory mapping, which I know doesn't sound like anything related to the SSD, but a lot of developers map and remap memory.
Vamos a ver se os discos rígidos que podes adicionar têm que ser proprietários da Sony ou caros, como a Vita era, com os cartões de memória.
To assist the coprocessors.
Hoje, Duarte, bem-vindo.
Probably the biggest coherency issue is stale data in the GPU caches. Flushing all of the GPU caches whenever the SSD is read is an unattractive option. It could really hurt the GPU performance. So we've implemented a gentler way of doing things, where the coherency engines inform the GPU of the overwritten address ranges, and custom scrubbers in several dozen GPU caches do pinpoint evictions of just those address ranges. The best thing is, as a game developer, when you read from the SSD, you don't need to know any of this. You don't even need to know that your data is compressed. You just indicate what data you'd like to read from your original uncompressed file and where you'd like to put it, and the whole process of loading it happens invisibly to you and at very high speed. Back to the dream.
No entanto, até agora, este tempo todo só falaram do disco rígido, Zé.
5.5 gigabytes
Não é,
per
Saca?
second really should translate into something like 100 times faster I/O than PS4 and allow the dream of no load screens and super fast streaming to become a reality.
Yeah, Nelson, é esse o objetivo.
Expandability of our SSD is going to be quite important. Flash is costly, and you may very well want to add storage to whatever we put.
A falar dos discos.
Now, the kind of storage you need depends on how you're going to use it. If you have an extensive PlayStation 4 library and you'd like to take advantage of backwards compatibility to play those games on PlayStation 5, then a large
Backwards compatibility?
is ideal. You can leave your games on the hard drive and play them directly from there, thus saving the pricier SSD storage for your PlayStation 5 titles, or you can copy your active PlayStation 4 titles to the SSD. If your purpose in adding more storage is to play PlayStation 5 titles, though, ideally you would
Por causa da
add
velocidade.
SSD storage. We will be supporting certain M2 SSDs. These are internal drives that you can get on the open market and install in a bay in
Para jogar os antigos, yeah. Por causa do requisito da velocidade, se calhar tem que ser muito caro para poder jogar os da 5.
They connect through the custom I/O unit, just like our SSD does.
Espera que cada jogo não seja 200 GB, né, hoje em dia.
Decompression, I/O coprocessors, and all the other features I was talking about. Here's the catch, though. That commercial drive has to be at least as fast as ours. Games that rely on the speed of our SSD need to work flawlessly with any M2 drive. When I gave the Wired interview last year, I said that the PlayStation 5 SSD was faster than anything available on PC. At the time, commercial M2 drives used PCIe 3.0, and 4 lanes of that cap out at 3.5 gigabytes a second. In other words, no PCIe 3.0 drive can hit the required spec. M2 drives with PCIe 4.0 are now out in the market. We're getting our samples and seeing 4 or 5 gigabytes a second from them. By year's end, I expect there will be drives that saturate 4.0 and support 7 gigabytes a second.
Mais
Having
caras.
said that, we are comparing apples and oranges, though, because that commercial M2 drive will have its own architecture, its own flash controller.
Não vai ser igualzinho aos deles.
The NVMe specification lays out a priority scheme for requests that the M2 drives can use. And that scheme is pretty nice, but it only has 2 true priority
Até que aposto que ele está a dizer isto tudo para dizer que a Sony vai criar os seus próprios extras para a gente pagar por eles.
with only 2 priority levels, definitely. But our custom I/O unit has to arbitrate the extra priorities rather than the M2 drive's flash controller. And so the M2 drive needs a little extra speed to take care of issues arising from the different approach. That commercial drive also needs to physically fit inside of the bay we created in PlayStation 5 for M2 drives. Unlike internal hard drives, there's unfortunately no standard for the height of an M2 drive, and some M2 drives have giant heat sinks. In fact, some of them even have their own fans. Right now, we're getting M2 drive samples and benchmarking them in various ways. When games hit beta as they get ready for the PlayStation 5 launch at year-end, we'll also be doing some compatibility testing to make sure that the architecture of particular M2 drives isn't too foreign for the games to handle. Once we've done that compatibility testing, we should be able to start letting you know which drives will physically fit and which drive samples have benchmarked appropriately high in our testing. It would be great if that happened by launch, but it's likely to be a bit past it. So please hold off on getting that M2 drive until you hear from us. Okay, back to our principles. Balancing evolution and revolution is the second of them. This was definitely a recurring theme with the GPU. We need new GPU features and capabilities. If we only have more performance, it's not really a new generation of console. Of course, many of these capabilities result in more performance. That's part of why a PlayStation 5 teraflop is more powerful than a PlayStation 4 teraflop. But we aren't just looking for the performance. We also need the ability to do something with the GPU that could not have been done before. And we need higher performance per watt. Every time we double the performance of some GPU component, we don't want to find out we've doubled the power consumed and the heat produced. But at the same time, we have to make sure the GPU
Vamos ver, Eduardo.
PS4 games, and we have to ensure that the architecture is easy for the developers to adopt. Now, backwards compatibility was handled masterfully by
Estão a explicar isto tudo só para explicar o quão cara ela vai ser.
throughout the design process. As our solution to adding new features without blindsiding developers, we made sure that if there were new significant
Só queria que fosse backwards compatibility para tudo, Zé. Mesmo sendo a PS3 muito difícil de emular.
Supports ray tracing, but you don't have to use ray tracing to make your game. The GPU supports primitive shaders, but you can release your first game on PlayStation 5 without making any use of them.
600 mesmo não pode ser porque eles não vão cometer o mesmo erro, era meme.
I'd like to make clear 2 points that can be.
Eu acho que esse vai ser o preço do normal.
First, we have a custom AMD GPU based on their RDNA 2 technology. What does that mean? AMD is continuously improving and revising their tech. For RDNA 2, their goals were, roughly speaking, to reduce power consumption by re-architecting the GPU to put data
Este senhor tem cabelo super japonês.
to optimize the GPU for performance and to add a new, more advanced feature set. But that feature set is malleable, which is to say that we have our own needs for PlayStation, and that can factor into what the AMD roadmap becomes. So collaboration is born. If we bring concepts to AMD that are felt to be widely useful, then they can be adopted into RDNA 2 and used broadly, including in PC GPUs. If the ideas are sufficiently specific to what we're trying to accomplish, like the GPU cache scrubbers I was talking about, then they end up being just for us. If you see a similar discrete GPU available as a PC card at roughly the same time as we release our console, that means our collaboration with AMD succeeded in producing technology useful in both worlds.
Ainda não sabes
It
isso?
doesn't mean that we as Sony simply incorporated the PC part into our console.
Sim, é
This
adaptada, a gente já
continuous
percebeu, Zé.
improvement in AMD technology means it's dangerous to rely on teraflops as an absolute indicator of performance, and CU count should be avoided as well. In the case of CPUs, we all understand this. The PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 each have 8 CPUs, but we never think that meant the capabilities and
Lá, Doriki, bem-vindo.
It's the same for CUs. For one thing, they've been getting much larger over time. Adding new features means adding lots of transistors.
É o seu cu.
In fact, the transistor count for a PlayStation 5 CU is 62% larger than the transistor count for a PlayStation 4 CU. Second, the PlayStation 5 GPU is backwards compatible with PlayStation 4. What does that mean? One way you can achieve backwards compatibility is to put the previous console's chipset in the new console.
Foi o que fizeram com a 3.
PlayStation 3s, but that's of course extremely expensive. A better way is to incorporate any differences
Software.
in the previous console's logic into the new console's custom chips, meaning that even as the technology evolves, the logic and feature set that PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 4 Pro
É
titles
3 a 2 e 1, nada, né? Pois, para vocês pagarem pelo Now.
modes. One advantage of this strategy is that once backwards compatibility is in the console, it's in. It's not as if a cost down will remove backwards compatibility like it did on PlayStation 3. Achieving this unification of functionality took years of efforts by AMD, as any roadmap advancement creates a potential divergence in logic. Running PS4 and PS4 titles at boosted frequencies has also added complexity. The boost is truly massive this time around, and some game code just can't handle it. Testing has to be done on a title-by-title basis.
É mais jogos a serem HD Remaster, da 4 para 5 para vocês pagarem.
The top 100 PlayStation 4 titles as ranked by playtime, and we're expecting almost all of them to be playable at launch on PlayStation 5.
Almost, quase.
With regards to new features, as I said, our strategy was to try to break new ground, but at the same time not to require use of the new GPU capabilities. For more than a decade, GPUs have imposed a restriction on game engines. Software handles vertex
Eu pensei que as pessoas que estão em baixo fosse tipo um PNG, mas não, estão os mexer.
responsible for the triangles and other geometry that the vertices form. That means it's not possible to do even basic
Xbox e Nintendo. Não, PlayStation 3, 2 e 1, ou a 2 e 1, Zé. Xbox e Nintendo.
that uses it is off-screen. PlayStation 5 has a new unit called the Geometry Engine, which brings handling of triangles and other primitives under full programmatic control. As a game developer, you're free to ignore its existence and use the PlayStation 5 GPU as if it were no more capable than the PS4 GPU, or you can use this new intelligence in various ways.
A Xbox vai fazer isso.
Usage could be performance optimization,
Desde a primeira.
removing backfaced or
Eles querem é que tu pagues pelo Now, Zé. Eles podiam pôr um emulador de software. Se eu tenho neste PC o emulador, eles podiam ter
allow the
também.
game to synthesize geometry on the fly as it's being.
Como a 4, na 4 tu podes comprar jogos da 2.
Using
Quer dizer que
primitive
corre.
shaders on PlayStation 5 will allow for a broad variety of techniques, including smoothly varying
Faz.
level of detail.
O não mal funciona, maluco. Só funciona os jogos que dá para fazer download. O streaming não funciona, Zé.
Visual special effects.
Parece o Stadia.
Major new feature of our custom
Ray Tracing. Isso a gente já sabia, né, Zé?
is ray tracing, using the same strategy as AMD's upcoming PC GPUs.
Yeah.
The CUs contain a new specialized unit called the intersection engine, which can calculate the intersection of rays with boxes and triangles.
Acho que é um Ray Tracing, mas não sei se é exatamente igual de PC, se é customizado para as consolas.
Acceleration structure. It's data in RAM that contains all of your geometry. There's a specific set of formats you can use. They're variations on the same BVH concept. Then, in your shader program, you use a new instruction that asks the intersection engine to check a ray against the BVH. While the intersection engine is processing the requested ray triangle or ray...
Não, o Ray Tracing é muito importante para ter os melhores gráficos, melhor iluminação, que muda o jogo todo, nem imagina. Ray Tracing é muito bom.
So it's a good mix with logic-heavy code.
Eu tenho uma 1070 e o Ray Tracing mata a minha placa.
To use ray tracing, PS4 graphics engines will run just fine on PlayStation 5, but it presents an opportunity for those interested. I'm thinking it'll take
Agora não há caixa, é streaming.
rays a second to have a big impact on audio. That should be enough for audio occlusion and some reverb calculation.
Yeah, exatamente, Saca, tens razão, exatamente.
If you invested in ray tracing, it should be possible to do some very nice global illumination. Having said that,
Mas eu acho que vou sacar esta live em vídeo só para ouvir a voz deste senhor enquanto adormeço, que é mesmo smooth.
Could take hundreds of millions of rays a second, and full ray tracing could take billions. How far can we go? I'm starting to get quite bullish. I've already seen a PlayStation 5 title that's successfully using ray tracing-based reflections in complex animated scenes with only modest costs. Another set of issues for the
Estou a dizer que o custo vai ser
GPU
modesto.
involves size and frequency. How big do we make the GPU, and what frequency do we run it at? This is a balancing act. The chip has a cost, and there's a cost for whatever we use to supply that chip with power and to cool it.
Yeah, Rui,
In general, I like running the GPU at higher frequency. Let me show you why. Here's two possible configurations for a GPU roughly of the level of the PlayStation 4 Pro. This is a thought experiment. Don't take these configurations too seriously. If you just calculate teraflops, you get the same number. But actually, the performance is noticeably different because teraflops is defined as the computational capability of the vector ALU. That's just one.
Estás a explicar tanto, quer dizer que a nível de número vai ser menos número do que
And
a
those other
Xbox.
units all run faster when the GPU frequency is higher. At 33% higher frequency, rasterization goes 33% faster. Processing the command buffer goes that much faster. The L2 and other caches have that much higher bandwidth, and so on. About the only downside is that system memory is 33%
Yeah.
in terms of cycles. But the large
Sabemos nós que ele mata pessoas enquanto fala para elas desta forma. Vou-te
As
cortar
a friend
agora
of
uma
mine says,
perna.
a rising tide lifts all boats. Also, it's
A live é um bocadinho cheia de grãos,
36
Jesus, até aqui para mim,
parallel
no máximo de
than it is
qualidade.
to fully use 48 CUs. When triangles are small, it's much harder to fill all those CUs with useful work. So there's a lot to be said for faster, assuming you can handle the resulting power and heat issues, which frankly, we haven't always done the best job at.
Não mesmo, que a minha PS4 parece que vai levantar voos, quando ligo a uns
Our
God of
process
War.
for setting CPU and GPU frequencies has relied on some heavy-duty guesswork with regards to how much electrical power games will consume and how much heat will be produced as a result inside of the console. Power consumption varies a lot from game to game. When I play God of War on my PS4 Pro, I know the power consumption is high just by the fan noise. But power isn't simply about engine quality. It's about the minutia of what's being displayed and how. It's counterintuitive, but processing dense geometry typically consumes less power than processing simple geometry, which is, I suspect, why Horizon's maps
Minecraft, confirmed.
makes my PS4 Pro heat up so much. Our process on previous consoles has been to try to guess what the maximum power consumption during the entire console lifetime might be, which is to say,
Salve, Marco Mons,
worst
bem-vindo.
case scene in the worst case game, and prepare a cooling solution that we think
God of War, Red Dead Redemption, Metro,
if we get it right,
e o Gran
fan
Turismo.
noise is minimal.
E o Minecraft, na frente.
The console will be quite loud for the higher power games, and there's even a chance that it might overheat and shut down if we misestimate power too badly. PlayStation 5
Yeah.
is especially challenging because the CPU
Tem que é um jogo da 3, mas...
56-bit native instructions that consume a lot of
Ele é um Android, por isso é que ele fala assim tão calmo.
here and there, but presumably only minimally used. Or are they? If we plan for major 256-bit instruction usage, we need to set the CPU...
Agora vai só explicar esta minúcia toda e depois é isso. Fiquem bem, no verão falamos mais.
And fan. So, after much discussion, we decided to go
Salve, power Guido!
different direction on PlayStation 5. We built a GPU with 36 CUs. Mind you, RDNA2 CUs are large. Each has 62% more transistors than the CUs we were using on PlayStation 4. So if we compare transistor counts, 36 RDNA2 CUs equates to roughly 58 PlayStation 4 CUs. It is a fairly sizable GPU. Then we went with a variable frequency strategy for PlayStation 5, which is to say we continue...
Sabes o que era bom também para a gente saber que o vosso GPU é bom? Mostrar um jogo a correr na PS4 com grandes gráficos em gameplay sem ser NVIDIA. Isso é que era mesmo bacana.
Frequency of GPU and CPU until they reach the capabilities of the system's cooling solution. It's a completely different paradigm.
Porque é robô,
Rather
sacam?
than running at constant frequency and letting power vary based on the workload, we run at essentially constant power and let the frequency vary based on the workload. We then tackled the engineering challenge of a cost-effective, high-performance cooling solution designed for that specific power level. In some ways, it becomes a simpler problem because there are no more unknowns. There's no need to guess what power consumption the worst-case game might have. As for the details of the cooling solution, we're saving them for our teardown. I think you'll be quite happy with what the engineering team came up with. So, how fast can we run the GPU and CPU with this strategy? The simplest approach would be to look at the actual temperature of the silicon die and throttle the frequency on that basis. But that won't work. It fails to create a consistent PlayStation 5 experience. It wouldn't do to run a console slower simply because it was in a hot room. So rather than look at the actual temperature of the silicon die, we look at the activities that the GPU and CPU are performing.
E ainda não é water cooling.
On that basis, which makes everything deterministic and repeatable. While we're at it, we also use
Yeah. Eu aqui de pijama, de roupa, já estou a comer e a beber café, né?
so it can squeeze out a few more pixels. The benefits of this strategy are quite large. Running a GPU at 2
Nós a
gigahertz
jogar
is looking
FIFA
like an
no
unreachable
marítimo
target
com esta live a correr no cantinho aqui, até eles anunciarem alguma
With this
coisa.
new paradigm, we're
Na boa,
able to
Leonardo.
run way over that. In fact, we have to cap the GPU frequency at 2.23 gigahertz so that we can guarantee that the on-chip logic operates properly. 36 CUs at 2.23 gigahertz is 10.3 teraflops.
Para ser mais rápido, Nelson.
The CPU to spend most of its time at or close to that frequency and performance. Similarly, running the CPU at 3 gigahertz was causing headaches with the old strategy. But now we can run it as high as 3.5 gigahertz. In fact, it spends most of its time at that frequency. That doesn't mean all games will be running at 2.23 gigahertz and 3.5 gigahertz. When that worst-case game arrives, it will run at a lower clock speed, but not too much lower. To reduce power by 10%, it only takes a couple of percent reduction in frequency, so I'd expect any downclocking to be pretty minor. All things considered, the change to a variable frequency approach will show significant gains for PlayStation gamers. The final of our 3 principles was about finding new dreams. It's important for us on the hardware team to find new ways to expand or deepen gaming, and that's what led us to a focus
Poético.
on 3D audio. As players, we
Vamos
experience
falar sobre áudio durante
the visuals
uma hora agora.
and through the feedback we receive from the controller, such as rumble or haptics. Personally, I feel a game is just dead without audio. Visuals are, of course, important, but the impact of audio is huge as well. At the same time, the audio team on a game project has to do a lot with a little. For example, on PlayStation 4, there's fierce
Está
competition.
aqui outro eu, Zé, já ao meu lado a fazer outra sombra,
Audio
você que não vem.
typically ends up getting just a fraction of a core. That's not much of a computational resource, particularly when you consider that the visuals run at 30 or 60 frames a second, but audio processing needs to happen at almost 200 times a second. So it's been tough going making forward progress on audio with PlayStation 4, particularly when PlayStation 3 was such a beast when it came to audio. The SPUs in Cell were almost a perfect device for audio rendering. Simple pipelined algorithms could really take advantage of asynchronous DMA and frequently reach 100% utilization of the floating point unit. There's unfortunately nothing comparable on PlayStation 4. Probably the most dramatic progress in the PlayStation 4 generation has been with virtual reality. The PSVR hardware has its own audio unit. It supports about 50 pretty decent 3D sound sources. And this provided a hint as to where we could go with audio, as well as some valuable experience. Not to oversimplify, but here were our goals for audio on PlayStation 5. The first goal was great audio for everyone, not just VR users or soundbar owners or headphone users. That meant audio had to be part of the console. It couldn't be a peripheral. The second goal was to support hundreds of sound sources. We didn't want developers to have to pick and choose what sounds would get 3D effects and which wouldn't. We wanted every sound in the game to have dimensionality. And finally, we wanted to really take on the challenges of presence and locality. Now, when we say presence, we mean the feeling that you're actually there. You've entered the matrix. It's not, of course, something we thought we could perfectly achieve, but the idea was that if we stopped using just a rain sound and instead used lots of 3D audio sources for raindrops hitting the ground at all sorts of locations around you.
É bom para quem tem aqueles fones, headsets e colunas 7.1 e tal, vai ser mais suportado. Mas lá está, a empresa que faz o jogo tem que fazer o jogo para suportar isso.
This has the capacity to affect your appreciation. Just like
music. Eu sou bocado lerdo no que toca a estas coisas de mais técnicas.
The concept of locality is simpler. It's just your sense of where the audio is coming from. To the right of you, behind you, above you. This can immerse you further in the game, and it can also directly enhance the gameplay. To use Dead Space as an example, I know, old school. You're fighting enemies in fairly dark, spooky locations. Back in the day, if you played the game using the TV speakers, you could tell that there was one last enemy growling and hunting you down, but it was difficult to tell quite where that enemy was. With headphones, you could tell that the enemy was somewhere on the right, which let you deduce, if you couldn't see it, that it must be somewhere behind and to your right. But with 3D audio with good locality, the idea is you know the enemy is precisely there, and you turn and you take it out. So, how do we know where a sound is coming from in the first place? Well, all those bumps and folds in the ear have a meaning, evolutionarily speaking. Based on what direction the sound is coming from, sound waves bounce around inside the ear, there's some constructive and destructive interference, and the result is a change in volume. The phase of the sound also shifts, depending on what path the sound wave took to reach the ear canal. These volume changes and phase shifts are different for each direction and also vary depending on the frequency of the sound. Head size and head shape also impact the sound in a similar fashion.
Confirmed.
Based on direction and frequency can be encoded in a table called the Head-Related Transfer Function, or HRTF. Here's part of one. The vertical axis is
Estamos a ter uma aula sobre o corpo humano, Zé.
The direction, front and back, and the
Como nós ouvimos?
degree of attenuation of the sound at that frequency. The HRTF is as
Anatomia Sony version
as a fingerprint is. In fact, you're looking at mine right now. Here's how we measure an HRTF. We've taken hundreds of people through this process. We put a microphone in the subject's left and right ear canals, and then sit the subject down in the middle of an array of 22 speakers. We then play an audio sweep from each speaker as we rotate the subject. In the course of 10 or 20 minutes, we're able to sample the HRTF at over 1,000 locations. Using an HRTF
é assim que vocês vão ter que jogar PlayStation ligado àqueles microfones todos sentados assim com o pescoço e jogar. Silence, eles estão a explicar tudo. Já tiveram a falar do CPU e do GPU durante meia hora cada um. Not even joking.
Unfortunately, the processing has to be done in frequency domain rather than time domain, so there's multiple.
Foi o CPU foi o SSD. Tiveram meia hora a explicar o SSD.
For every audio tick. That's a lot of multiplies.
Só para no fim dizerem, e é por isso que a consola vai custar 2.000 euros.
It meant we had to bite the bullet and design and build a custom hardware unit for 3D audio. Collectively, we're referring to the hardware unit and the proprietary algorithms we run on it as Tempest 3D audio tech. The meaning of 3D audio and technology should be here. As for Tempest, I feel it really reflects on goals with audio. It suggests a certain intensity
Temos que jogar Call of Duty
and also
Silence.
hints at your presence within it. We're calling the hardware unit that we built the
Cross-platform.
Tempest engine. It's based on AMD's GPU technology. We modified a compute unit in such a way as to make it very close to the SPUs in PlayStation 3. Remember when I said that they were ideal for audio? So the Tempest engine has no caches, just like an SPU. All data access is via DMA, just like an SPU. Our target was that it would have more power than a CPU, thanks to the parallelism that a GPU can achieve, and that it would be more efficient than our GPU, thanks to the SPU-like architecture. The goal being to make possible near 100% utilization of the CU's vector units. Where we ended up is a unit with roughly the same SIMD power and bandwidth as all 8 Jaguar cores in the PlayStation 4 combined. If we were to use the same algorithms as PSVR, that's enough for something like 5,000 sound sources. But of course, we want to use more complex algorithms, and we don't need anything like that.
Era isso que começava a referir, 6 às 8 e tal, a gente pode jogar bocadinho depois de
It would
jantar.
have been wonderful if a simpler strategy, such as using Dolby Atmos peripherals, could have achieved our goals, but we wanted 3D audio for all, not just those with licensed soundbars or the like. Also, we wanted many hundreds of sound sources, not just the 32 that Atmos supports. And finally, we wanted to be able to throw an overwhelming amount of processing power at the problem, and it wasn't clear what any peripheral might have inside of it. In fact, with the Tempest engine, we've even got enough power that we can allocate some to the games, to the extent that games want to make use of convolution reverb and other algorithms that are either computationally expensive or need high bandwidth. But the primary purpose of the Tempest engine remains 3D audio. Now, 3D audio is a major academic research topic. It's safe to say that no one in the world has all of the answers. And the set of algorithms that has to be invented, tuned, or implemented...
Não sei, mas ligamos-nos a uma aula, literalmente, que as aulas são pela internet, né? Ligamos-nos aqui a uma aula, eles enganaram-se na stream. Já é feito para os developers, para os engenheiros.
I talked about making a sound source appear as if it's coming from one of those 1,000 HRTF sample locations. But for high-quality 3D game audio, we have to handle other possibilities. The sound source might not be at one of the 1,000 HRTF sample locations, so we have to blend the HRTF data from the closest locations that we have sampled. The sound source might be moving, which needs very special handling as that blend keeps changing, and that can cause phase artifacts in the resulting audio. Or the sound source might have a size to it, meaning it should feel as if it's coming from an area rather than a single point.
Das duas, uma, ou eles não têm jogos para mostrar, não têm confiança nos jogos, ou eles estão mesmo orgulhosos da consola. Estão a ver, se calhar isto que eles estão a mostrar é super revolucionário, não sei, até quero ver as reações. Parecem estar muito orgulhosos. Ou encher chouriços.
Like the spherical harmonics used in computer graphics. And finally, there's audio devices. The player might be using headphones or TV speakers or have a higher-end surround sound setup with 6 or more speakers, all of which need different approaches. That's a lot of variations. It's nice to have
a lot of damage.
Computational resources of the Tempest engine, but it's clear that achieving our ultimate goals with 3D audio is going to be a multi-year, step-by-step process. Having said that, headphone audio implementation is largely complete at this time. It was a natural place for us to start. With headphones, we control exactly what each ear hears, and therefore the algorithmic development and implementation are more straightforward. For TV speakers and stereo speakers, we're in the process of implementing virtual surround sound. The idea being that if you're sitting in a sweet spot in front of the TV, then the sound can be made to feel as if it's coming from
uma consola inspirada, ou seja, bué estranha.
Virtual surround sound has a lot in common with 3D audio, but it's more complex because the left ear can hear the right speaker and vice versa. We have a basic implementation of virtual surround sound up and running. We're now looking at increasing the size of that sweet spot, which is to say, making the area you need to be in to feel the 3D effect larger, and we're also working to boost the sense of locality. Headphone audio is the current gold standard for 3D audio on PlayStation 5, but we're going to see what we can do to bring virtual surround sound to a similar level, after which we'll start in on setups with more speakers, such as 6-channel surround sound. It's now to the point where some of the PlayStation 5 games in development are extensively using these systems. One of the game demos allows you to toggle between conventional PlayStation 4 style stereo audio and our new 3D audio. I listened with just an
Já é bom para
ordinary
quem tem muito e tem tipo uma sala de cinema privada, estão a ver, para jogar jogos e ver filmes, para aquelas salas grandes e...
Conventional stereo audio feels smashed flat by comparison. The improvement is obvious. So,
E o que vou mostrar vai ser mesmo pouco, Nelson, estou mesmo a ver.
Entered the matrix. Does my brain believe I'm really there? Like I was talking about earlier when I explained our target of presence. Well, the answer is no. But you probably caught on to what's missing here, namely whose HRTF was being used. It wasn't mine. It was the default HRTF. The audio team analyzed the hundreds that they measured and chose the one they felt was the closest fit to the total game playing audience. This shows a piece of the default HRTF on the left and my HRTF on the right. You can see that the general features are much the same, but the details are quite different. With the default HRTF, as I said, the 3D audio sounds pretty great. When I use my HRTF, though, the audio reaches a higher level of realism, which is to say that when using headphones and my HRTF, I occasionally get fooled and even think a sound...
Obrigado, Detalhes, pela invasão, Zé. Como é que vocês estão? António, Ricky, como é que vocês estão, Zé?
A corollary to this is that there are a few people whose HRTFs are sufficiently far from the default HRTF, that's the red dot,
não é, Nelson, Jesus Christ, it just works.
PS5 style audio and not
Bem-vindos, seus malucos.
I've had a few
a conferência mais interessante que vocês já viram na vossa vida, Zé. É mesmo super fixe.
Stereo audio. Presumably they're the ones at the very edges of this diagram.
Nice, Ricky.
What HRTF you're using is key. I'd like everyone to be able to experience what I'm experiencing, but obviously it's not possible to measure the HRTF of every PlayStation user. That means HRTF selection and synthesis are going to be big topics going forward as the Tempest technology matures. At PlayStation 5 launch, we'll be offering a choice of 5 HRTFs. There's a simple test where you pick the one that gives you the best locality. That's just the first step, though. This is an open.
Eu sei que tem a barra em baixo, Zé, mas para já deixem estar.
You'll be sending us a photo of your ear, and we'll choose a neural network to pick the closest HRTF in our library. Maybe you'll be sending us a video of your ears and your head, and we'll make a 3D model of them and synthesize the HRTF. Maybe you'll play an audio game to tune your HRTF. We'll be subtly changing it as you play and home in on the HRTF that gives you the highest score, meaning that it matches you the best. This is a journey we'll all be taking together over the next few years. Ultimately, we're committing to enabling everyone to experience that next level of realism. Hopefully, I've been able to illustrate a bit about our design and decision-making process today and why PlayStation 5 has the feature set that it does. Now comes the fun part. We get to see how the development community takes advantage of that feature set. I'm hoping for the completely unexpected. Will it come from audio, ray tracing, the capabilities of the SSD, or something else? I guess we'll find out soon enough. Thank you for your time.
Meu Deus. Nada. Bem-vindos. Olá, Tóxico. Bem-vindos. Muito obrigado, Detalhes. Zé, acabou. Zés, não mostraram absolutamente nada. O pessoal vai todo cair em cima deles. Vocês não têm noção. Que desilusão, Zés. What? Ei, tão estúpido, meu. É que foi absolutamente nada. Ok. Parabéns, Shoni. És a maior, Zé. Vamos ter live às 9. Sim? Às 21. Ok, Zé? Qualquer coisa, vejam o Insta, vejam o Twitter. Eu vou dar novidades. Vamos ter mais hoje, malucos. Eu sinceramente não acredito. Literalmente, silence. Ele disse que foi aquilo e vou mostrar mais no futuro. Tchau. Não mostraram absolutamente mais nada. Zé, fiquem bem. What the fucking hell? Agora fiquei-me chateado. Jesus. Tchau, my friends. Obrigado pela vossa companhia e peço desculpa por vos ter feito perder tempo. Obrigado, Sony. Jesus